She stepped into the arena, and no one rose. Just a girl with a lopsided ponytail, wearing a wrinkled linen dress, carrying an old sword no one had bothered to oil. Every gaze turned away. All the titles had been handed out long before the match began. But then, with a single strike, the entire hall jumped to their feet, not to cheer. But no one could believe what they had just witnessed. This is not the story of a queen. This is the story of someone who was never invited to the table. Rome. A gloomy autumn morning, yet thick with elegance. Inside Palazzo Bernini, the venue of Europe's most prestigious fencing tournament, the clash of blades, the tap of leather soles on marble, and the arrogant laughter of nobility echoed like a symphony of the elite. Everything gleamed white breastplates, silver-plated mesh masks, and names descended from classical fencing schools, Versailles, Oxford, Milan. Each competitor carried a pedigree, a fencing academy, and a sponsorship from a fashion house or a multinational conglomerate. This was not a place for outsiders. And then, she appeared. A young woman in an unbranded fencing uniform, faded gloves, a mask slung over her shoulder with a coarse canvas strap, and white sneakers worn thin at the sole. In her hand was a slender sword wrapped in a weathered leather scabbard. Slung across her back, a plain cloth bag with no logo. No coach at her side, no nameplate, no applause to greet her, and for a split second, the entire hall fell silent before the laughter began. She must be staff. No, probably a student who got lost. Wait. She's here. To compete. A coach from the French team leaned in and whispered, "She's wearing a uniform but no logo. She's not from any academy." A German fencer raised an eyebrow. "Her sword? That's a model from the 90s. Then a female voice rang out, cold, composed, and far too familiar with power. "Let me take her in the first round." It was Princess Elena Visconti, captain of Team Italy, daughter of a tycoon and 3-time European League champion. She smirked as she spoke. I could use a warm-up before I face someone worthy. The hall burst into laughter, except for one man, an older technical supervisor, the only one who kept his gaze on the girl. He tilted his head, his eyes resting on the worn scabbard by her side. No one else noticed that detail, but he did. That scabbard once belonged to a legend who vanished after a scandal that rocked the fencing world 15 years ago, and if his guess was right, this girl was that legend's daughter. As the laughter filled the grand hall, the girl said nothing. She simply reached into her cloth bag and pulled out a sword so old that the entire room fell silent, not out of reverence, but sheer disbelief. The blade was tarnished. The hilt was wrapped in fraying linen. The tip was slightly bent as if it had just been pulled from some ancient armory, long forgotten by light. Oh Lord, is she really going to compete? With that whispered a committee mother covering her mouth. Probably a stage prop. Or some souvenir from a bankrupt antique store sneered a young man with silver hair and silk gloves. That was Enzo di Castellano, son of the president of the Italian Fencing Federation and a 3-time European junior champion. The girl, still unnamed, handed over a business card. Its edges were torn. Only one faint line of ink remained: Clara Bellini, assistant coach. The head of registration frowned. "Sorry. Assistant to whom we have no one by that name in our system." A pause followed, small but heavy, as if the name itself had stirred centuries of dust from the corners of history. Then a soft clatter of a chair from the back row. An elderly man in a fedora and round glasses, who had remained silent all along, slowly stood up. "Clara Bellini," he murmured, voice rough with time. "She's the daughter of Giancarlo Bellini." The room froze. Those who recognized the name immediately sat up straight. Giancarlo Bellini. Italy's fencing prodigy was once called the man who stole God's reflexes. 15 years ago, he was banned for life after a scandal that no one ever dared speak of. He vanished without a trace, and was never mentioned again. His daughter. No way. Enzo muttered, his smirk slowly fading into unease. Clara did not confirm. She simply bowed her head and said softly, "I'm only asking for one bout, 1 minute, 1 point. If I lose, I'll leave. And I'll never step into any arena again." The room fell into stillness, not because they were convinced, but because they were challenged. For those who believe themselves above others, they always assume they cannot be defeated. Accept her challenge. A no-name assistant with a rusted sword. Enzo laughed, each word crisp and theatrical, like he was setting up the punchline of a comedy act. "I think we've had enough entertainment for the day." A few chuckles rippled through the hall, but they didn't land quite as cleanly this time, because as Enzo laughed, Clara didn't. She didn't bow. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at him. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't pleading. It was unwavering. And that silence, that was what unsettled the room. "Fine," Enzo shrugged. 1 point, 1 minute, but don't say I didn't warn you. If that linen shirt tears, I'm not paying for it." He turned to the judges, smirking. "Exhibition bout, non-ranked, prep the strip." The arena lights immediately shifted. The fencing floor lit up in soft blue, casting reflections of steel across the ceiling. All eyes began to drift toward the center. Clara stepped in. No electric chest guard. No regulation fencing gloves. Just a faded linen shirt, sleeves loosely rolled, and a rusted blade held firmly in both hands. Across from her, Enzo stood in pristine white gear, a precision mask sealed tight to his face, his competition-grade épée weighing barely 1/3 of Clara's weapon. He yawned, then settled lazily into a stance, arrogant, unbothered. En garde. Prêt. Allez. Everyone expected a stumble, an awkward swing, a harmless scrape. Clara didn't charge. She took 1 step, perfectly timed. Precise. Like each movement had already been composed in an invisible sonata only she could hear. Enzo struck first, a straight-line sprint like a fired arrow. The floor almost jolted beneath his speed. But Clara's blade didn't block, didn't counter. It tilted by just 1 degree, just enough for him to miss. Then she turned, calmly, unflashy, and with a light flick, her blade touched his shoulder. 1 contact, 1 point. The red light lit up. Point for Clara. The hall went dead silent, like someone had unplugged the entire building. 2 full seconds passed before the referee confirmed touché. 1 point. Clara Bellini. A single clap. Soft, from the back row. Then another. And another. Not because they adored her, but because they realized they had just witnessed something they couldn't name. A silence that made the noise of the world feel suddenly irrelevant. And Enzo. He stood frozen in disbelief. His knees had dipped involuntarily, his reflexes not yet recovered. He yanked off his mask, his face flushed, not with rage, but with embarrassment. That wasn't luck. That wasn't a technical error. That was a lesson written in old steel, and a pair of eyes that never left their mark. The applause lingered, scattered, hesitant, as if the hall itself was uncertain what exactly were they clapping for a seemingly meaningless point, or because for the first time they had just watched arrogance get pierced. That was a system error, one judge muttered to the person beside him. The censor's too sensitive. Or maybe the other replied in an even lower voice, "She's not who we thought." Enzo stood in the center of the strip, his face burning like he'd just been slapped. No one was laughing at him, and that somehow was worse. They just looked, with awkward eyes, with pity, or with the quiet guilt of those who chose to look away. No one in high society could stomach a public scratch to their pride, least of all from someone they had once considered invisible. In the front row, Contessa Vivienne Moreau, the grand patron of the tournament, placed her champagne flute down without a sound. Her face was carved from marble cold, still immune to chaos. "Who is that girl?" she asked her assistant. "Contessa, she's an unlisted participant, a technical assistant with the French team. No one really knows much. Her name is Clara Bellini." Bellini. The name drew a crease across the Contessa's brow, familiar but displaced, like an echo from another time. On the strip, Enzo turned to the referee. "I want a rematch," he said, his voice tight but demanding. Clara said nothing. She simply stepped back and nodded, not out of submission, but out of quiet readiness. A judge interjected, uncertain. "Enzo, this was just an exhibition match." "No, not anymore." Enzo's voice cracked. "She thinks she can beat me." His volume rose. "Give me one more minute." Clara remained silent. The audience began to stir. Some of the elite students from the famed Sterling Fencing Academy leaned forward in their seats. Moments ago they had laughed. Now they were curious. Backstage whispers grew louder. Who is Clara Bellini? Where did she train? Why hasn't her name ever appeared on a ranking? A strike like that doesn't come from luck. But only one man knew for sure. Seated at the end of the hallway, his hand resting on a cane of polished oak, his white hair glowing faintly under the corridor lights. Professor Etienne Laurent, the man who once trained 3 world champions, watched the arena screen with narrowed eyes. "That entry move," he murmured, "isn't taught in any curriculum." And then, for the first time during the entire tournament, he smiled. That's the kind of strike from someone who once stood alone between 2 blades and survived. 1 minute. Just 1 minute for a rematch, what Enzo claimed as a chance to reclaim his honor. But to Clara, that minute was a mirror. Because when you're truly better than a powerful man, you don't need to defeat him. You only need to let him see that he's already defeating himself. The blades clashed again. This time, Enzo didn't give her room to advance. He charged like a storm, his strikes faster, harder, driven by anger. "Don't think one lucky thrust makes you a champion," he growled, eyes blazing. Clara didn't respond. She blocked, stepped back, blocked again. No academy form, no counterattacks. She simply endured. A thrust toward her shoulder, she slipped past it. A downward cut, she pivoted, not retreating, but turning her stance. Her footwork remained the same, quiet, graceful, like a dance to music only she could hear. And suddenly, the fencing strip became a true stage where the audience stopped breathing. No one laughed anymore. They were witnessing something not taught at Sterling, something not found in Enzo's highlight reels. They were witnessing someone the world had dismissed, show them what it means to endure without breaking. Sweat began to form on Enzo's brow. Despite the fury in his attacks, he couldn't break through her. And then ting, a soft, clear touch. Clara tapped his wrist just enough to score a point in an official match. But what left the room stunned wasn't the point. It was her posture. Clara hadn't countered to win. She had simply touched, then stepped back and bowed her head, ever so slightly as if to say, "I don't need to defeat you. I only need you to understand." Enzo looked down at his blade, then up into her eyes. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smug. She was simply calm and composed in a way that nothing in him could pierce. In the front row, Contessa Moreau was no longer watching the match. She was watching Clara, and watching her for a long time. "Bellini," she murmured. Could she be from the Bellini line in Siena? Her assistant scrambled to check the genealogy database. "Madam, there was a Clara Bellini. She won the European Juniors when she was 13. Then she vanished." The Contessa leaned back in her chair, her once icy gaze now softened into silence. "She didn't vanish," she said. "The world just became too loud to hear footsteps that quiet. 1 bow, 1 step back." The rematch ended with no official score, but everyone in the room knew. One person had stepped out of the shadows, and the other would now have to learn how to face the light. Clara left the strip in silence. No applause, no cheers, just silence. The kind of silence that didn't come from defeat, but from an audience unsure of what they had just witnessed. A loss, a victory, or something they had been missing all these years. Clara Bellini, a journalist whispered. Wasn't that name once all over the news in Italy? Another quickly pulled out a phone. Searching. And then Clara Bellini, the prodigy once nicknamed the Steel Flower of Siena. Old photos surfaced. A radiant 13-year-old girl standing on the podium with a gold medal from the U14 European Championship, stunning the fencing world with a style described as silent but impossible to ignore. But after that, no more matches, no more interviews, no explanations. She vanished. And now she had reappeared at an elite exhibition match. No professional gear, no coach, no new titles, just a quiet smile and a pair of eyes that had never backed down. The news spread faster than wildfire. Clara Bellini returns fencing prodigy missing for 10 years, reappears at Sterling event. She didn't fight to win, she fought to remind the world who she used to be. That night footage of the rematch between Clara and Enzo went viral on TikTok and YouTube. No filters, no edits, just Clara, each retreat, each dodge, each soft breath-like touch, and Enzo striking endlessly, unable to cut through that quiet. On a sports podcast the next morning, a veteran commentator said, "We always talk about speed, precision, and scores, but last night I saw something in 30 years of commentary I've never seen before: a woman standing still, and an entire power structure forced to look back at itself." Enzo made no public comment, but sources from the Sterling Club confirmed he had withdrawn from his next 3 tournaments due to personal reflection. And Clara, she gave no interviews. Accepted no sponsorships. She posted just one sentence on her long-abandoned personal page: "People don't disappear. They're just pushed out of frame until no one dares to look away anymore." The offer arrived on Monday morning. A red wax-sealed envelope was neatly placed at Clara's hotel room door at the Hôtel Vendôme. Not an email, not a phone call, a handwritten letter. Real ink, embossed with the crest of the British Royal Fencing Union. Dear Miss Bellini, we were deeply impressed by your performance at the Sterling exhibition. We would like to invite you to become the official face of the 2025 Royal season, alongside Duke Victor Landon and champion fencer Audrey Fleurs. National television coverage will follow. There will be custom attire, a personal coach, and of course, compensation that no one refuses. Clara folded the letter. Morning light poured in through the window, casting a soft glow on her hair like a quiet crown. But instead of smiling, she whispered, "They invited me once before," then softer still, "that time." I was 13. A notification pinged from her phone. Sender Alessandro Bellini. One message. "If you go on television, they'll dig everything up again. Make sure you're ready." Clara closed her eyes. A memory surfaced: her mother collapsing on a roadside. A rejection letter from the National Academy. An offer made in exchange for silence. She opened her eyes, straightened her back, and said just one sentence. "This time, if they want me to step forward, they'll have to listen to the full piece I never got to finish playing at 13. Paris, 3 weeks later. The Royal Spring Fencing Tournament opened beneath the glass dome of the École de Versailles. Gold-embroidered banners hung from the ceiling. Television crews jostled for space. On the podium, Duke Victor Landon adjusted his cravat. Champion fencer Audrey Fleurs smiled gracefully at the cameras. Clara Bellini was nowhere to be seen. Organizers glanced around confused, but no one spotted the pale pink linen dress. No one saw the lopsided braid that once made an entire hall rise to its feet. Instead, in a poor district on the southern outskirts of Lyon, a new wooden sign had just been nailed to the gate of an old warehouse: Bellini Fencing House, a place for those with no place. No tuition fees, no uniform requirements, only one condition: bring a story you've never told and a sword you want to hold with both hands. Inside, Clara stood among 6 children. One wore plastic sandals. Another had a jacket sewn by a mother using leftover fabric. A shy boy raised his hand. "Miss, what if I'm not good? Can I still join?" Clara knelt beside him, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be good," she said softly. "You only need to have never believed you could be." Sunlight streamed across the old wooden floor, lighting up every scratch, every worn mark, and every pair of eyes finally being seen as worthy opponents for the first time. That evening on national television, a commentator posed a question. Clara Bellini turned down glory. Why she could have become a legend. An older man on the fencing council exhaled and said quietly, she didn't need to become a legend. Because true legends often leave their sword behind for someone else to pick up. Some people are born for the spotlight, and some only need to stand once to make an entire room fall silent. Today's story wasn't just about a fencing match. It was about honor that doesn't need medals, about strength that doesn't seek applause, and about a woman who never won anything on paper yet made everyone bow with her quiet integrity. What's the lesson here? In a world used to defining victory by applause and titles, there are still silent triumphs that speak louder than any crowd, because some swords don't need the spotlight to stay sharp, and some people don't need anyone to validate their worth, because calm and dignity are declarations no one can take away. My personal belief, I believe that at some point, all of us have been that girl walking into a room where no one welcomed us holding a sword. They mocked, dismissed, for how we looked rather than who we were. And sometimes, in the moments we're most humiliated, that's when true character is forged. If you've ever stayed silent while being underestimated, if you've ever endured in order to protect your worth without shouting, then this story was for you. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you believe in stories of quiet resilience and justice born from self-respect, subscribe to Toch Story. We'll keep telling the kind of stories that make you feel more joy, more love, or righteous anger at injustice, but never indifference. Toch Story, where the unheard become unforgettable.